Hi everyone, this is Matt with ESI Survival Guide, an online resource designed to help legal practitioners navigate the electronic wilderness. And today we are out here in the actual wilderness to talk about a survival tip that's very important for all those legal practitioners that are out there trying to use technology to address all of these challenges that they face in modern practice, which is every practitioner, or at least every practitioner that wants to satisfy their duty of competence. Because today, using technology in the practice of law, it's not really a choice, insofar as it's a choice to write your motion for summary judgment using one of these or even one of these, as opposed to carving it with a chisel on a stone tablet. The key question is not whether to use technology, but how to use technology to enhance your practice. How can you work more effectively, more efficiently? How can you drive better outcomes? How can you work more collaboratively with your teammates? How can you stay ahead of trends? And ultimately, how can you de-stress your life so you can spend more time with family and friends doing the things that you love? So it's March 2022, and we just finished Legal Week in New York City. I still actually have my badge, and there were so many amazing platforms, amazing applications and pieces of tech designed to address any number of issues that we face in the legal profession. And it goes way beyond just e-discovery and technology assisted review, which has captured the lion's share of our attention in legal tech over the past few years. There's all sorts of new applications in tech crossing domains that impact legal, including information security, info gov, legal hold, document retention, remote review, forensics and data collection, contract management, privacy compliance, cyber incident response. So how do you not get analysis paralysis with all of this technology that's out there? Well, one solution: incremental innovation. Now, I'm headed back to the studio to talk with two friends of mine about this concept, but it is freezing outside. I think it's about 29 degrees, but with the wind out here, it feels like it's about 15 degrees. So I need to make a fire. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can find out here in the wilderness to try and make a fire. Come on, let's go. So making a fire just by yourself out in the woods with no equipment can be a difficult thing to do. So I've enlisted some help. All right, you can help me make this fire?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Back up. They try a little bit harder, Daddy. You're doing it! And that's how you make a fire.
And now we have fire, which is pretty cool. It's amazing how you can take very simple materials like some kindling and some sticks and make something as important as fire. And if you're interested in how we did this, I'll link the video in the description below. Now, what's really cool is our ancestors began to control fire about 1 million years ago. Scientists today theorize that it's this innovation that allowed us to leapfrog the evolutionary scale, as it actually led to our brains growing bigger. Now, I know you're probably out there asking, Matt, what does this have to do with me using technology in my practice right now? Don't worry, I'm gonna get there. So you would think bigger bodies equal bigger brains, and gorillas and orangutans have much bigger bodies than humans, so why are our brains so much bigger? Over the course of history, as we evolved and we began to control fire, we began to be able to cook our food. So essentially, we began to outsource parts of the digestive process. Cooking food actually transforms the food itself chemically and physically. We're able to digest the food easier, we get more calories out of the food, and it takes fewer calories for us to digest it. And our brains require a ton of energy, so all of these new calories fueled the growth of our brains. Not to mention that once we were able to cook our food, we were more sedentary. We didn't have to go out and forage as much. That gave us time to sit around the campfire, be a little more introspective, and interact with one another a lot more. That also helped fuel lots of growth and development. Now, this concept is the same as it relates to the use of technology and the practice of law. The more you adapt and use technology, the better you are at eliminating duplicative efforts, reducing routine tasks, and gaining better insights and understanding into the matters that you work on. But Matt, you ask, there's so many tools out there that I can jump into right now. Why would I use 2 sticks to start a fire when there's so many better tools out there? If I wanted to start a fire, why wouldn't I use something like this? So clearly, this gas range is much better than our stick and kindling setup. It's more powerful, it's more efficient, and it's much easier to use. However, aside from the fact that if you showed up during the Stone Age with one of these things, you'd at best be worshipped as a deity, but more likely you'd be bludgeoned to death by a crazed mob out of fear. Think of all the things that have to happen before you can effectively use this innovation. You would have to have the engineering skills and tools to be able to manufacture all these parts. It wouldn't be until 5000 BC that you would have iron. And then you'd have to wait until the 13th century BC before you had steel. Not to mention, think of the infrastructure that you need for the gas to fuel this range. So there's so many pieces and parts and things that have to happen before you can take full advantage of this innovation. And the same thing can be said about transformational change at a law firm or a law practice. There's so many pieces and parts that have to align before you can take full advantage of innovation in that way. You might have to have multiple stakeholders that have to buy in on a certain transformational effort. You might have to have new skill sets, new employees that can maximize what you can get out of those new technologies. And that's why incremental innovation can be so powerful. Small changes can have massive impact. Think about when humans began to control fire and then using that to cook, which then led to all these evolutionary changes that impact who we are today through our brain power. Now, in that same way, as a legal professional, small changes can lead to evolutionary leaps in your law practice. Now, let's get back to our fire. So maybe going from 2 sticks to the oven is a little bit much, but you can innovate on a much smaller scale. Maybe something like this, or maybe you can use something like this. You can even innovate using the 2-stick method. You can find drier wood. You can find a way to rotate the stick faster. You can get more effective oxygen input into the kindling. There's a lot of different ways you can innovate. The bottom line is you can always do something to move the ball forward, no matter what your practice specialty is, no matter your experience or skill level with technology or your individual situation. Wherever you are on the evolutionary scale of technology maturity when it comes to the practice of law, you can always take small steps to innovate. Now we're running a little bit late, so let's run back to the studio and talk with Sadie Khodorkovsky and Scott Milner about incremental innovation and how we can all take small steps to use the great technology that's out there and available to us in our law practice. Let's go. Let's go.
We're late for work. Let's run.
What's up with this guy? I feel like I know we're in the right location. I feel like we've been here before, and I just assumed he'd be here by now.
No, hopefully I hope we have the right day, time. I don't even know anymore. It's all one long.
Hey guys. Sorry I'm late. I just had a nice walk back from upstate out in the woods. So I appreciate you guys waiting for me here. But let me real quick, let me get out of these camping clothes and change into something a little more comfortable, right? Real quick. Hi everyone, this is Matt and you are watching ESI Survival Guide. We are an online resource designed to help legal professionals navigate the electronic wilderness. And today we're going to talk about the concept of incremental innovation with our 2 awesome guests, which I'm thrilled to have on the podcast. But before I make those introductions, a few housekeeping items. All this information that we talk about today, it's meant for general purposes only and not meant to be construed as legal advice. And the thoughts, words, comments, hopes, and dreams of our speakers are theirs in their individual capacities only, and not those of their respective organizations. And we come out with new content all the time. So if you do enjoy the video, you find it helpful, feel free to, as the YouTubers say, smash that like button, or also maybe leave a comment, talk about incremental innovation in your own practice, leave some questions, or if you really want to be awesome, subscribe to the channel. And with that, I want to introduce our two guests. First, let me introduce Sadie Khodorkovsky. Sadie, how are you?
Excellent, excellent. Nice to see you.
And did I get that right?
Close enough. Sadie Khodorkovsky.
I always just get it close enough. I never get it yes.
Yeah.
You would think with the last name Knopf, which has been perpetually pronounced Knopf, Knoof, and even Knurf, I would get it. So I have solidarity with you, but my apologies. Sadie is an executive director with JPMorgan Chase and the global head of legal discovery management. She also is a certified fraud examiner, a certified e-discovery specialist. She holds the electronic records management specialist certificate, is an NK certified examiner, has an e-discovery executive certificate from ACEDS, and is also a white belt in Six Sigma. Am I right?
Yeah, and I'm also ACED certified, not just the discovery certificate, the full kit and caboodle.
Boom. See, I knew that, and to be honest, there's a whole bunch more stuff I could recite too, but I'm trying to get my guests off the podcast and back to their respective jobs and families. So I could definitely go far. And our second guest, thrilled to have the man himself. You know him, you love him, Scott Milner, partner with Morgan Lewis and Bockius, and also the deputy of their eData practice group. One of the first and foremost firm e-discovery providers, if you will. Definitely a model that a lot of other firms have used. And I want to congratulate Scott because Scott was recently named to the Attorney Advisory Board of Relativity. Am I correct for that?
That's right. Well, thank you. And that was too kind of an introduction. But more importantly, if you do comment on this podcast, I hope you put a comment on my jacket because I wore it especially today for this podcast. So not only on the substance do we want to hear how everybody else is incrementally innovating, but more importantly, how we're incrementally dressing better as the pandemic hopefully ends.
I'm very impressed with Scott's outfit today. I mean, I'm always impressed with Scott's fashion sense, but in particular today.
I mean, we're partnering up, Sadie. I had to bring my A game.
Yeah, and you know, like I'm supposed to be the host, but you're overshadowing me for sure. I thought the whole camping vibe would kind of make me seem interesting, but I want that coat. So good grief. If there's one survival tip that we're going to take away from this podcast, it's that Scott is a phenomenal dresser. so with that, and again, with Scott, just like Sadie, there's a million different things I could say about his storied career. Again, hopefully at a later podcast, we're going to do more in-depth profiles of each one of these awesome folks that's joining us. But today we want to talk about incremental innovation. So jumping right in, Scott, when we talk about transformation in the legal technology realm, often the words you hear is disruptive. And you think of these big sea changes, these big monumental shifts in technology. We talk about artificial intelligence. And I think a lot of times attorneys get a little bit maybe afraid, a little bit trepidatious about bringing technology on. Typically, most of us went to law school, unless we're members of the patent bar, because we're not that good at science or math, right? And so I'm wondering, you know, when you hear about these big technological developments, you hear words again like disruption. So this concept of incremental innovation, it sounds obvious, but set the context here. What exactly are we talking about?
I mean, to me, when I think about incremental innovation, it really is just small movements advancing whatever you're trying to do to solve a problem. So when people think of transformative, I think it paralyzes people from moving forward because it says, all right, I don't have the time. I'm already fully engaged, whether it be from the legal perspective or one of the professionals that support e-discovery or any other parts of our practice. And so to me, when I think about incremental, it's truly just taking small steps to getting to solving a problem. And it's funny because I've heard some other people talk about this, and I want to say something that incremental innovation can actually be transformative, right? Because a small step to fixing a problem to many could be transformative. And I think, you know, Sadie, I know for sure Sadie has, and I know that we've solved little problems to other practice areas or other people that don't do what we do every day it was mind blowing, right? Oh my God, you can do this now. So that to me is setting the kind of the bar of what incremental innovation is.
Do you need to have that big picture? In terms of the overarching goals, are you working towards a defined transformative goal? Or is it just that you take these little steps and then you figure out, hey, we're now at a different outcome that we didn't even realize we'd get to? Do you want to incrementally innovate with some type of larger goal in mind? Or is it just enough to make those baby steps in and of themselves?
I have to have a definition of what I'm trying to, either a problem I'm trying to solve or where I'm trying to go. Whether the incremental innovation leads me a different direction as I move down that pipeline, that's a whole nother story. But for me, I have to have some sort of goal in mind. Is it reducing the amount of time it takes for a certain task? Is it ensuring you button up certain quality control procedures? Is it onboarding new technologies to solve something that was very manual? You have to have some sort of problem you're trying to solve in order to figure out where you want to go. But at the end of the day, I maybe think I'm solving one thing, but I find out that, wow, the problem I'm actually trying to solve is completely different. And that's where that's where you learn. That's why, we try it and keep moving.
I totally agree with Scott. I think you need to have some sort of guiding post of what you want to ultimately achieve. So that way, you know where to even start with that project. Then along the way, if you start to move along or that guiding post starts to change, or what problem you thought you were solving ends up looking a little bit differently, or ultimately even gets solved with a little adjustment that you thought was a way bigger problem than you originally started out with, that's great. I think all of that just allows for people to be creative and be flexible, but you have to go into it knowing that you need to be comfortable being a little bit uncomfortable and not expecting that you're going to go down this mechanical path and be rigid in how that's being achieved, which I think historically is what people would do. And, it's the waterfall method and all of these different methodologies that people have created over the years to do project management. And I think now, especially in the pandemic era where people had to pivot so quickly on a dime and know that it was completely different in a world of innovation that we had no idea existed, but had to react to, I think force people to get a little bit more comfortable with that. But that's really what you have to allow yourself and your team to make those changes along the way.
And I'd like to say one more thing on this, Matt, is I think you have to define your goal to start, because generally needs some sort of buy-in from above, right? And Sadie and I may lead certain parts of our group, but there's always a champion that we have to report to, particularly if we're asking for time, resources, money, whatever it may be. So I have to think about, if I'm going to ask for something to support my initiative, they're going to want to know at least the beginning, what I'm trying to solve, what I'm trying to accomplish. And I think that's actually important, because by thinking through that, it gives you a lot of information to hopefully bolster the parts of the process that you're working through.
Well, that's a good point too. I mean, when thinking about, like Sadie, as you said, that you don't want to follow a rigid process, and Scott, your comment about needing buy-in from the top, both of you work for very innovative departments within your respective organizations. What is the criteria for when you decide to innovate in this manner? Do you have carte blanche to do little things? Do you need to get buy-in for every little thing that you do? Are there certain things you want to do and just, try and beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission? I'll turn to you, Sadie. Do you have a criteria where you're like, you know what, this is a small task. I can do this myself or with my team. I don't need to go and get buy-in for this thing. Or are you trying to use incremental innovation to show success to get buy-in for a bigger initiative?
I think it really depends on how much outside of my team I need. So if I need additional funding beyond what I have, if I need additional resources beyond what I have, and that could be internal resources, external resources, different resources that I currently need, that's where I start thinking about getting permission and having to get a business case together, because I need to ask somebody for something in addition to what we already have. And then there's the incremental, that's part of everybody's day job. I expect everyone on my team to be thinking about process improvement as they do their jobs. And so if there's something small that somebody can change that will help them do their jobs, is that something that they can do on the fly? Is that something that they should talk to their managers about? Because that's a process that we need to have in place and we need to have approved. So we we do encourage people to think like that in their day-to-day, but it really depends on what more is needed beyond themselves in order to achieve that incremental innovation.
Both of you work for very different organizations. And Sadie, in the corporate world, you're kind of working with, I know it's a moving target still, but you're working within one ecosystem, if you will, and you're growing and innovating in a way that, correct me if I'm wrong, my initial thought is that even a large organization has many, many moving parts. You can define the parameters in a way that you can identify goals and progress towards those goals. Whereas Scott, at a law firm, you have 100 different clients. Everybody has different needs. The way you innovate for your individual clients will be different based on the client, right?
Well, it's funny because I think both Sadie and I are probably shaking our head a little bit of that assessment there, because although
that's the role I can play. I can play the role of like affable goof.
Yeah, no, and that's a great way, because I bet you a lot of people think like that, right? But for me, part of what I've learned and tried to inspire across the team is that not everything we do is unique. And yes, there may be a portion of each thing we do that's unique. But part of what my job was when we built out this whole e-discovery practice at the firm is building processes. And whether it be for a pharmaceutical client that's global, that has 2 million employees and terabytes of data, or if it's a small biotech company that has never done litigation before, for me, it's still a part of the process, right? And it's enhancing data intake, chain of custody, exception handling, how we're going to promote data. So although I have a huge client base, I would say 80% of the steps that we take are the same with this information. So when we're making adjustments, my clients may have different problems. Sadie, when I'm addressing her, she may have different challenges than a different client that maybe hasn't even rolled out certain technologies like Teams. Some of the clients may have different challenges and problems I have to solve. But I would say most of my practice is actually something that I can make it process driven, do a lot of automation. And that's where I'm encouraging innovation. Incremental innovation is, all right, we now measure that it takes 2 hours to do this step in the process. Can I automate that where it takes 15 minutes to do that same process? Less human touch, more automation, more error identification. And that to me is about how I tackle this and on that front. And Sadie, I know you mentioned, probably similar in a lot of ways.
So Scott, innovation can be not just something new or something groundbreaking or something, again, moving towards transformation. It can be simply refining what you're already doing. And I think, Sadie, I'd like to get your opinion on this. Do you think in this industry, whether we call it data law, e-discovery, legal technology, which then dovetails into InfoGov, InfoSec, privacy, all these different areas, do you think there's too much of a premium put on innovation, that we're always trying to find the next best amazing thing? Should we just maybe pump the brakes sometimes and sit with what we're doing and just try and get used to what's happening now? Or do you have to always be innovating to keep up with developments in technology?
The funny thing is that I think people innovate and then we start talking about the same things that we talked about 10 years ago. So talk about InfoGov and you talk about record retention and you talk about these buzzwords that people are like, oh, the new hot thing. And the question really is, okay, well, what did we call it 5 years ago? What did we call it 10 years ago? Yeah, there are certain technological advancements and new tools and the way, particularly in the way that people communicate with one another that have changed. But at the end of the day, people are communicating with each other. So it's a question of how are we capturing that information for e-discovery purposes and understanding the tools that exist. Does it function in a way of something that we already understand, like a message board? Okay, so yeah, it's different, but it kind of functions the same way as something that we already are familiar with, and not trying to assume that everything new is 100% new and not relying on our own experiences. For those of us that have been in this industry for many, many years and learning from those things that we've been doing for so many years and saying, okay, how is this slightly tweaked differently? And can we apply the tools, the tech, the processes, the procedures, the case law that we've learned and used for so many years to this nuanced way of whether it's communicating or storing data or whatever it happens to be of the moment.
I really like that because there's a survival tip in there that I think will create some solace for a lot of our our brothers and sisters-in-law who get scared by tech. It's, again, like you said, not to think that everything new is 100% different. Maybe by looking forward or adapting to new trends, you have to kind of look back and realize that a lot of the new things we do aren't necessarily untethered from the things we already know. And I think that's actually probably an interesting concept, because there always seems to be a new lexicon with every new development. And I think maybe that's why a lot of people get so, I guess, so bogged down in the weeds of all this new development. It's very meta to move forward. Sometimes you have to go back. But Scott, let me turn to you. Can you let's get some practical tips for some folks. In a former life, I remember I did a blog post with some folks on one incremental innovation being using email threading on every case. Make that an every case thing. If you have email, thread it. And even at that time, that was pretty controversial because again, it was this application of tech in a way that organized data in a way people weren't normally used to doing on every single case. Do you have any of those type of things where it's like little things that maybe you do or you've adapted in your practice that leverage technology or process in a way that others might consider innovative, but you've been doing for quite a while?
Yeah, I think with the proliferation of data that we have, threading is obviously one way to reduce your data volumes, but clients are often asking us, we don't want to spend the kind of money on some of these tasks. What can you do to help us mine data quicker? So obviously we're using analytics packages to support that. So some things as simple as using Excel. And it was funny because people forget that it goes back to Sadie's point that a lot of things haven't changed. A lot of this you can do with new technology, but sometimes we just do data dumps into Excel and realize there's a lot of hash duplicates of attachments that are attached to different emails. And that's an easy way to, one, look for coding consistencies, look at potential junk files that are the same that we could be, maybe write for bulk tagging. We also pull out trends, things as follows, and I don't think it's very high tech, but it moves the needle. We do a report every time we get a data set for our clients, how many emails and what's the number of attachments in each emails. How many emails have 0 to 5 attachments? How many have 5 to 10 attachments, and so on? Because depending on the type of case, if an email has 200 attachments, it may be able to be reviewed in a different workflow. It could be that it's an embedded object issue, whatever it may be. So a lot of it is actually trying to generate reports and get to information as soon as your data is available, so you can make smarter decisions rather than just seeing I've got 200,000 doc population and just throwing people at it to do the review. So it's getting information out much quicker to support the process.
I'm sticking to my 2. That was 1.
The other innovation that we've done is, and this was actually before COVID, we were doing just kind of a review management application that actually takes out all of the data and all the coding decisions from all the reviewers that we work with. And it mines the information and it provides us quality metrics, accuracy metrics, and review rates. And some of that is built into certain platforms, but we wanted to be able to customize it. And when I say that, we're able to go into each database and we set up the tool for us to say, okay, we're more concerned about privilege overturns. If a reviewer is consistently marked from not privileged to privileged, that gets a -5 score. We may care less about issue codes or whatever it may be. So ultimately, we can roll up what the quality and accuracy metrics are of each one of the people that are assigned to our review teams. And we do it by type of case, industry. And for us, we were doing that very, I'd say, ad hoc, right? You'd go into certain review tool metrics, you'd review in QC, and people would have subjective criteria. We put it all into a system so that if we get a client that says, hey, I've got an ERISA litigation and we only have a short turnaround time, I'm able to kind of query that database to identify the right team for that case who has the experience that I need to make sure I'm staffing it appropriately.
Sadie, what about you? Do you have any tactics or things that folks can turn to as a tip for innovation, something people can apply, whether it's repurposing or using an older tool in a very advanced way, or something new that somebody could use in an easier way?
I think for us, it's really more about ask questions earlier on and don't use the same tried and true methods for every case just because they're easy and they're your go-tos. Think about think about what the case needs are, and is there a place to be a little more creative? Do you have a longer runway for this matter? Do you have flexibility? Do you have the opportunity to try a few different things, work with your case teams to make sure that things make sense? But think and start asking those questions earlier on and having those conversations earlier on in the matters, I think has been something that we've been really pushing on our side.
So that's amazing. Non-tech innovation, just switching your mindset for a particular case. I dig it. I like it. So the final two questions we're going to talk about, one relates to, Scott, the concept of buy-in that you brought up earlier in our discussion. And then we'll talk about maybe a case study, or if you will, to the extent you guys could talk about it, a way that you guys have potentially worked together in the past. And feel free to, of course, anonymize everything involved, because obviously we don't want to talk about any specific case or information, of course. Looking at how to get buy-in. So Sadie, we talked about how getting buy-in, it can depend on how far outside of your organization or your group you have to go. So Scott, if you are supporting a client from the eData group, how do you walk alongside them to help them get buy-in internally? Who are you trying to align? What are the stakeholder groups you're trying to align when you're helping your client make that move?
I think a lot of it will depend on what the ask is, on who I need to go to from a stakeholder's perspective. Because if it's a lot of, if it's money, you generally go into a different person than if it's just resources and partnership with your outside counsel, development teams, your service provider that you use all the time. So I hate to use the word it depends, but it really is in this instance, it depends. But how I support a lot of our clients on this is I actually say, okay, what do you believe you're trying to solve? What is your main pain point? And then we start to work backwards and figure out, all right, what puzzle pieces do we need to start gathering in order to start telling our story? I almost joke that it's like a 3D puzzle, because one may seem here, but ultimately it turns out it's up here at the end of the day. So I wish I had a better answer, but I really say it does depend on what you're trying to accomplish and who we would go to. You need to understand what your issue is. And then I like to start fleshing out what we think we need to get to that, kind of that resolution.
Well, no, I think that's super helpful, because I think you have so much experience in this area. It's interesting to hear that, and I assume it happens quite often, that somebody comes to you and because you didn't say, let's figure out what you need. Your comment was, I like to figure out what the client thinks they need, right? And then you can almost translate that, because I imagine sometimes those two things don't align. People think they're doing one thing and you're like, wait a second, here's what you're actually talking about. But Sadie, more practically, when you spoke about having to go outside of your organization, are you having to demonstrate ROI in like a presentation beforehand, or are you going to do things first to have actionable intelligence about how this might actually work, and then showing stakeholders outside of your group, hey, look, I did this on this smaller scale and it works. Let's scale this out. Is it more getting buy-in through showing by presenting metrics and potentials, or is it about demonstrating that this is potentially beneficial?
I hate to say that it depends.
No, you got me again.
I know. And this time, both of us got the it depends.
I'm gonna put like the no smoking sign, but it's gonna be like I guess the people at Fox, they say the no spin zone, right? This is gonna be the no it depends zone. But now continue.
What I think is if the project is based on work that's already been done, so you've identified a need based on something that's already going on, or in the course of an existing project, or during the course of matters, and you identified that there's a better way to do something, you already have something to lean on to say, this is why I'm even contemplating this ask, because based on my history, based on what I've seen, here's what's missing. Here's what else I need to do, so that way the next time we see this type of situation, I want to be better prepared for the next case, versus I'm kind of looking at my organization. I'm thinking about a 3 to 5 year roadmap. Of course, if you're creating a project, it's because something has come up that you're thinking, I want to do better. I want to do different. So there's always going to be some baseline of history that you need to come prepared to talk about the why of the ask. It can't be just, I have absolutely no idea why I'm asking you for this. Someone in the industry told me that this is cool, and so I want to try it. Well, okay, but does this at all reflect anything on what we do as a business or what we see day to day? So I think you need to be prepared to explain what this has to do with your day to day and what this is going to do. So whether it's, if we had this over the last year, 2 years, we would have seen this difference, or if I see this in the, so I think you have to foundationalize it to things that people understand. So you want to make sure that when you're talking to your stakeholders, you're not alienating people that are unfamiliar with your world, the book of work that you have, and creating a way for them to relate to what your ask is, and allow that conversation to be more free-flowing versus maybe combative or questioning and end up taking you in a whole different direction rather than focusing on what the ask of the moment is.
That makes a lot of sense. And Scott, that goes back to your point. It sounds like if there's an undercurrent to a lot of what we're talking about, it's the art of innovation is as much about the tech or the science or whatever you're doing as it is the language and how you communicate this stuff. And it sounds like, Scott, a lot of what you do is you empower your clients to have the language to be able to communicate internally what they're trying to accomplish. Would that be?
Yeah, and going back to your statement about, the fact that I have hundreds of clients that I'm looking for, maybe that's creates a lot of variance. I think that's where partnering with our clients, I can really provide support in innovation requests, because as you said, sometimes we don't know what we want, but I have the benefit of a large client base to say, okay, you're actually trying to solve X. Do you really mean X? Or here's all the other things I've seen happen in this space that may benefit in what you're looking to make the request and ask for. So the ability to see across a large portfolio of different clients may help provide some clarity in what the ultimate request is.
And let's conclude on this. And that perfect, we didn't plan this, perfect lead-in, Scott. So as we're talking about clients, it's not too common that we have two guests on at the same time, let alone two guests who have worked together in different capacities over their careers. Is there something that you guys can talk about? And of course, without giving any specifics, but a way that as a corporate stakeholder, as a law firm partner, that you guys have worked together to incrementally innovate in a way that was ultimately very value generating.
We all talk about that, the variance of issues that we have between a law firm and a law department. Are they that different? So one of the case studies that we have is that Sadie and I talked and said, okay, we have very similar challenges, and it would be interesting if we worked together and divided our team into diverse groups to say, okay, you have this problem, I have this problem. You have this problem, I have this problem. What if the teams went to their own separate corners, talked about how they would think to solve them, and we made sure our teams didn't necessarily live, breathe these issues on a day-to-day basis, because sometimes when you're living in the day-to-day, it's really hard to see outside perspective or think about problems that you could be solved with solutions that are so creative and maybe even so basic, but to the person doing it every day, they seem very foreign, like I can never do that. So we made sure and create diverse teams. And then we had the benefit of touch base points and say, okay, what did your team come up with to solve this problem? What did your team come up to solve this problem? So for us, and from the law firm perspective, getting to hear that our clients have very similar challenges that we have, or how they were solving them may be very similar or very different. It was nice because it created a dialogue between the two that we could take information and practice pointers that we could take back to our respective groups to truly make real innovative steps to solving our respective problems.
I found the whole exercise great, because I think what we sometimes, when we go into war rooms ourselves, we have the people that we work with, but we always have the same types of people joining those conversations. So, it's that your participant from technology is usually the same people. Your outside counsel might be the same people. Your business and finance people might be the same people. So you have your network that you tend to bring in as your advisors. So even though we work closely with Scott and his team, these were different people than we even worked with. And from that group, and kind of thinking about it as, yes, we work together, but having my operations team and working alongside our project managers versus our attorneys versus kind of different functions even within our team that don't always intersect. And now you add that additional layer of our outside counsel and different people that they work with and the clients that they intersect with on a day-to-day basis. And now starting to talk about the way that we work and the issues that are coming up and seeing, okay, you know what? Irrespective of what we do as a day-to-day function or what clients we serve, whether it's our internal clients as a business or external clients, these are fundamental things that even if you leave your current job today and go to something completely different, whether it's at your existing company or elsewhere, these are things that you can take with you as practical next steps and tools in your toolkit for your business life and personal life. I think there was a lot of things that you really could think about and say, oh, this helps me kind of organize things a little bit differently.
When I initially thought of this concept of incremental innovation and what it might look like on a podcast, I thought we'd be talking exclusively technology and different tools and things people use and all this great stuff. But the takeaway is essentially that innovation is much more about your team, the perspective, trying to develop a process so that you're not always reinventing the wheel and innovating without it being connected to something that you're trying to achieve, having a goal in mind, and also making sure that you're looking back in the past and trying to understand the things you've done before and how that might help you move forward in the future, so that you can innovate A, without being afraid of it, and B, you can make progress without having to be transformative, as we said at the very beginning. So that's really, really helpful. I think those are really great survival tips.
Now, you said something I think that was there. You said it was about our team, right? And I think Sadie also references earlier that we find it incumbent upon our team to think about incremental innovation in their day-to-day job. I think I've shared this with you personally before, but one of my mentors outside of my firm actually told me that as a leader of somebody trying to build an innovative team, our job is to instill the desire to try to change our process, right? To improve it. And our job as leaders, one, to make sure that people aren't afraid to fail, not afraid to raise and escalate new ways of what we do. And our job as a leader, and was something that resonated with me, because you often think about being a leader as somebody who has to say yes or no and do all the work and drive this and all that. And I found out, and this was the mentor told me, said, my job is to listen to the ideas and try to get the roadblocks out of the way so we can move the ball forward in these innovations. That meant so much to me.
In the end, if you're on Scott's team, everybody, if you get hired on Scott's team and you have a terrible idea that fails miserably, you may not get fired.
Same with Sadie's team. We even have a place in some of our team meetings for an idea called Dare to Try, where we highlight and ask people to speak about projects that failed. And what did they learn from it? And what did they do next after that thing didn't work as they had expected? So that way people hear from all levels of the team about the different types of projects and innovative, creative ideas that people are trying.
Yeah, if people are afraid, you get paralyzed, right? I mean, I think that's the problem. And then nothing moves forward. And then you don't even get incremental. You definitely don't get transformative. You probably won't even get incremental innovation at that point.
That's a great place to conclude our conversation. Again, with this notion that creativity, and it dovetails with the whole concept of diversity and having diverse teams. The more diverse your team, the more creative, the different perspectives you're going to have. And it sounds like really the survival tip, the takeaway for any organization that is trying to innovate in a sustainable and scalable way, it's to make sure your team is free to have open thoughts and to be creative and to communicate up the chain in a way that's going to facilitate that innovation. It reminds me of the quote, I forget who said it, but I think it might be Mark Twain. You have to go out on a limb because that's where the fruit is. I think, if anything, again, that just adds to this whole notion that innovation isn't always about technology. It's about your thought process and how you work as a team. So that is fantastic. And with that, I want to thank both of our guests. This is the conclusion of our discussion on incremental innovation. Sadie Khodorkovsky, I'm not shying away from the name. I'm going to try. I could have just said, Sadie, thank you.
was way better. I'm very impressed that your incremental innovation and incremental progress since the beginning of this conversation.
That's all. I hope you guys thought I was engaged. All I've been thinking about the whole time is how I'm going to pronounce your name at the end of the podcast. And of course, Scott Milner and his beautiful, wonderful jacket. Scott, thank you so much for being here. I love it. I love it. And I hope that both of you will come back on. My viewers didn't really get to explore much of your backgrounds and who you are as people. It's one of the big things we love to do on ESI Survival Guide is profile the awesome, amazing, interesting folks and personalities in the industry. So hopefully you guys will agree to come back. I'm putting you on the spot now. But with that, again, if you like the video, smash the like button, send us a comment, or please subscribe. This is Matt from the ESI Survival Guide telling all of you out there to stay safe in the electronic wilderness. Take care and see you next time.